Let me get to the background, of course, on the Phoenicians. Let me first talk about exactly, who were the Phoenicians. The Phoenicians were like Canaanite peoples. They say theorize from historians that they're kind of very similar to what would be like the Israelites or Jews later. They kind of live in the same area, although if you know about it, they live right above that, mostly in what was now the country of Lebanon. Of course, circa 1200 BC is when they take off as a culture. But they do think that these Canaanites, went back thousands of years. Like I think 3,000 BC or longer that they go back. And we'll get to it later, but one thing they're very famous for, their maritime trade. They're great sailors, the Phoenicians, sailing throughout the Mediterranean Sea. They think they sailed into the Atlantic, also I'll talk about later. And so they're a civilization that influenced a lot of other peoples throughout that region. They influenced the Egyptians, they influenced the Greeks, probably Mesopotamia as well. Kind of here's kind of an image, of course, of modern Lebanon today. Lebanon, you see there, sort of see the Lebanese flag on the top left. They say most Lebanese people are still descended, from going back to Canaanite peoples from a long time. I think I read it's about 90% still today are descendants of people that lived throughout that region a long time ago. But you can see those are some of their famous cities: Tripoli, Beirut, Sidon, Tyre. Those were once famous, city-states that went back to like Phoenician times. And kind of get into a little background about their culture, about the name itself. The term Phoenicia supposedly translates from Greek. It means usually the purple land. I'll get to it in a little bit later. It's like I talked about in the video because of that famous dye they had. They were known as also the purple people. So that's what supposedly Phoenicians meant, the purple people. Phoenix, you see that word up there, Phoenix, which means purple or deep red, is usually would be like a Phoenician person, would be what that would be. And predominantly lived in the Eastern Mediterranean, and they took basically what were these what they think are murex snails. They think that they're kind of like mollusks, basically. They would take the actual mucus of the actual snails and they would make the dye out of it. And I guess they got it on their hands or on their body, and so they were known as the purple people, but they're mostly known for exporting it, of course, to people, things like that. So and they call it different names. I'll kind of put on the screen here, but Tyrian purple, I think, or royal purple was quite a common nickname that they would call the dye that they sold, I guess, in dye cloth, et cetera, that went with that. And Phoenicians were, like I said, primarily known for maritime trade, like basically a type of civilization that traded with different civilizations throughout the region. And so that enabled them to create a huge network of trade, which lasted, they think, close to 1,000 years at one point. And like in later, like with the Israelite kings and all that, they would actually kind of borrow that, like the purple dye. They would have those bluish robes that they would have, which was like the mark of like royalty, the mark of kings. And so that's sometimes why they called it royal purple, the nickname for that. But like I said, they had different cities. They're really city-states that were independent of each other. They weren't really, like all like one kingdom or empire. Each like city-state was ruled by a separate like monarch at first. Over time, they go to like an oligarchy, which the Carthaginians were more known for. They had kind of like an oligarchic republic, I think is what it will be, of course, later. Here's some other images I'll kind of show you. That, of course, is kind of ruins of what is Tyre right there that you're looking at. Of course, a major city in modern Lebanon. I think Tyre today has a population of about 200,000 people that live there. You're looking at the ruins of it, that's left of it. And they do think that it was a city that was probably settled as far back as about 2800 BC. This is according to some historians today, and they do think that Herodotus was one of the first to really mention the city of Tyre, like its existence and all that. So it's a very ancient city. It's considered one of the oldest cities in the world, too. Most people don't know that. But yeah, you're looking at some of the ruins of it right there with those three images. Of course, one thing that they're very famous for is their alphabet. You see, which now the alphabet is something that they think they help to kind of influence like other alphabets throughout the world. Phoenician is considered to be one of the first major phonetic alphabets, a simplified alphabet, which, if you know about it, it's very simplified. It only has 22 letters, like 22 consonants that's in it. Written right to left, so it's like a Semitic type language, which they think descended from maybe Proto-Canaanite languages from a long time ago. It has no vowels in it. Like they don't really add vowels to alphabets later. So a lot of early alphabets like Hebrew, etc., Aramaic don't have vowels, but they do think it's an important alphabet because the fact that it influenced the rise of many other alphabets. Like it basically led to a lot of your Semitic alphabets. Like it led to Aramaic, led to Hebrew, then of course also Arabic, and then on the other side, like Greek, Latin, and other similar alphabets were also influenced by it as well. It's very similar to Hebrew, of course. Later, Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, you see there. And they have different names for it. Like the Carthaginians used it up to like the 2nd century BC as an actual language. And sometimes they do call it the Punic alphabet. That's what sometimes the Romans would call it, which is really Phoenician in the Latin. So here's kind of kind of like a map showing you here, like how the alphabet is related, like the family tree going back to the Phoenician. So you can see how kind of like the Phoenician kind of led to the branches of different type of languages throughout the world. So you can see Phoenician led to a lot of Aramaic, Assyrian type languages, etc. Hebrew, Arabic, Persian too. I think Persian was also influenced by Phoenician as well. Etruscan Latin, of course, led to a lot of your Western languages being developed. Of course, Greek, Cyrillic, even Russian. The Russian language, of course, is somehow descended from Phoenician. Old Hebrew, Samaritan. You even got some of these Proto-Arabic, Southern Arabic, and Ethiopian languages are actually descended from the Phoenicians as well. So that's pretty amazing, about how the Phoenicians influenced all these different languages, throughout the world. That's like their legacy, by the way, because if you know about the Phoenicians, most of their culture was wiped out.